The invitations arrived every morning at precisely 7. They did not knock. They did not announce themselves. They simply slid under the door, thin white rectangles that skittered across the floorboards like paper ghosts seeking a home. Chikondi watched them pile up near the baseboard, a growing stack of silent demands he refused to touch. He did not need to read the ink to know what they promised. The hallway door creaked open, and the shadow fell across the room before the man did. Banda stood in the frame, leaning his weight against the wood, blocking the only path to the outside world. "Just come sit," Banda insisted. His voice was a steady, rhythmic pulse that seemed to match the ticking of the clock. "No pressure, just watch." Chikondi remained still, his back to the door, staring at the dust motes dancing in the sliver of light. "It is only one night," Banda added, his tone dropping into a low, persuasive hum. "You are missing the rhythm of things." Banda finally stepped back, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed in the small room. The silence that followed was worse than his voice. Chikondi turned to his desk, his hands shaking. He reached for a pen, but his fingers refused to obey. He gripped the edge of the wood instead, digging his nails into the grain until his knuckles turned stark white. The wood groaned under the pressure. He closed his eyes, trying to force the image of the invitation out of his mind, but it only sharpened. He saw the sequence clearly, playing out like a film. First, the chair. He would sit, the wood hard against his back, the room dimming. Then, the glass, the liquid amber catching the light, the first swallow burning a path down his throat. Then, the slow, steady erosion of his resolve. It was a mechanical, predictable slide into the dark. He could feel the loss of control starting in his chest, a tightening that made every breath a labor. The cycle was not a memory. It was a physical weight, pulling him down toward the floorboards, demanding he surrender to the rhythm. The floorboards groaned under the weight of a new arrival. Chikondi did not look up, his grip still locked tight to the desk, but the air in the room shifted. Luca walked in, his footsteps heavy and rhythmic, each strike against the wood vibrating through the small space. He stopped just behind the chair, his presence casting a long, jagged shadow over the desk. He did not speak immediately. He watched the back of Chikondi's neck, his eyes narrowing as he tracked the visible tremor in the other man's shoulders. The tension in the room thickened, turning the air stale. "You okay?" Luca asked. The question was not a comfort. It was a probe. Chikondi kept his gaze fixed on the wall, his jaw set so hard it ached. He did not answer. Luca leaned in, his face inches from the desk, his tone dropping into a low, serrated edge. "Old things don't stay old if you keep visiting them." The words hung in the air, sharp and cold, cutting through the silence like a blade. Chikondi felt the weight of the statement settle into his chest. He knew the truth of it. The silence in the room was absolute until the phone vibrated against the desk. It skittered across the wood, a sharp, metallic sound that made Chikondi flinch. He stared at the screen, the light pulsing in the dim room like a warning. It was Thandiwe. He let it ring 3 times before his thumb hit the button. He did not speak. He just listened to the faint, rhythmic static of the connection. "You sound tired," she said. Her voice was thin, filtered through the distance, lacking the warmth he remembered. Chikondi looked at his reflection in the dark window, his face a ghost against the night outside. He felt his throat tighten, the muscles locking as he prepared the lie. "I am fine," he said. The words felt hollow, dropping into the space between them like stones. He heard her sigh, a soft, ragged sound that betrayed her own exhaustion. "Talk to me," she pleaded. The request hit him with the force of a physical blow. He opened his mouth, the truth about Banda and the invitations burning in his chest, demanding to be let out. But the weight of his own failure was too heavy. He remained silent, feeling the distance stretch until the line felt ready to snap. The phone grew warm against his ear, a steady, pulsing heat that mirrored the frantic rhythm of his own heart. Thandiwe was still there, waiting in the silence, her breathing barely audible over the crackle of the line. Chikondi gripped the edge of the desk until his knuckles turned bloodless. He needed to say it. He needed to tell her about the invitations, about the shadow in the hallway, about the way his life was unraveling. He took a sharp, jagged breath, his chest rising and falling in a desperate rhythm. The truth sat on his tongue, heavy and jagged, but his throat refused to cooperate. It felt as if his vocal cords had been fused shut by the weight of his own shame. "I just miss you," he finally whispered, the words small and pathetic against the vastness of the distance. The connection clicked, a sharp, final sound. He sat in the dark, the phone dead in his hand. Friday arrived not with a sunrise, but with the heavy, pressurized weight of an impending storm. The air in the apartment grew thick, stagnant, and charged with static. Chikondi felt the change in his marrow. He moved toward the door, his hand reaching for the handle, when the floorboards groaned under a sudden, heavy weight. Banda stood there. He did not move aside. He filled the doorway, his presence an immovable obstacle. The hallway lights flickered, casting long, erratic shadows. "Tonight," Banda said. The word was not a suggestion. It was a command, delivered with a rhythmic, steady finality. No excuses. Chikondi stopped. The pressure in the room spiked. He wanted to speak, to refuse, but the words died in his throat. He stood frozen, the choice already slipping from his grasp as the storm outside began to lash against the glass. The walk to the venue was a blur of gray pavement and rushing wind, but the moment he reached the entrance, the world fractured. A wall of sound hit him first. The bass was not merely audible, it was a physical weight, a rhythmic thumping that traveled through the soles of his boots and settled deep in his chest. Each beat felt like a hammer striking his ribs, forcing his breath into shallow, jagged gasps. He stopped, his feet rooted to the concrete. Inside, the air was thick with heat and movement. Strobe lights fractured the darkness, turning the room into a series of jagged, disconnected frames. His vision swam, the colors bleeding into one another, until he could no longer distinguish faces from shadows. He pressed his palms against his thighs, trying to ground himself, but his heart was a frantic, trapped bird, slamming against his ribcage with enough force to make his vision pulse in time with the music. The noise swallowed his thoughts, leaving only the raw, electric hum of the impending collapse. He was no longer moving forward by choice. He was being pulled. The threshold was a razor edge. Chikondi stared at the door, his fingers twitching at his sides. The music behind the wood was a dull, rhythmic thud that matched the frantic cadence of his pulse. He took a breath, but the air felt thin, stripped of oxygen by the sheer proximity of the past. A voice, smooth and insidious, coiled through his thoughts. "You are stronger now," it hissed, a lie so practiced it almost sounded like truth. "One night won't break you. You can walk in, watch, and walk away." It was a trap, and he knew it, yet his hand moved of its own accord. He reached out, his arm trembling with a violent, involuntary tremor. His skin felt too tight, his nerves firing in rapid, erratic bursts. He saw his hand hover over the metal, the surface dull and unforgiving in the low light. He closed his eyes. Then, he gripped the handle. With a slow, deliberate movement, he pressed down. The latch clicked a sound, like a bone snapping. He pushed. The door gave way. The door swung wide, and the full force of the room collided with him. A wall of humid, smoke-heavy air rushed out, carrying the scent of spilled drinks and stale sweat. Inside, the light was a chaotic strobe, flickering in violent pulses, of blue and white that turned the crowd into a series of jagged, frozen statues. Chikondi stood on the threshold, his boots rooted to the floor. The music was no longer a distant thud. It was a physical pressure, vibrating through his teeth and rattling his vision. He tried to pull back, but the momentum of the room was a vacuum. A shoulder slammed into his, then another, pushing him forward into the crush. He stumbled, his arms flailing for purchase. But there was only the press of bodies and the roar of the bass. He looked back, but the door was already swinging shut, the latch clicking into place with a sound of finality that cut off the last of the outside world. The space he had fought to build, the quiet, the order, the distance vanished. He was inside. The floor beneath him felt unstable, shifting like sand as he was swept deeper into the center of the room. He reached out, fingers brushing against a wall that felt slick with condensation. But his grip found no hold. The past was not behind him anymore. It was all around him, rising up to meet him in the dark. He took a breath and let the current of the crowd carry him into the center of the abyss.